Apparently, the Springboks were falling over themselves to congratulate us at the end. Or at least I think that's what Chelsea Colby was doing. Anyway, it's time to start harping on rugby. Hello, my name is Jeff Pagano and welcome to Harpin On Rugby, where with the help of some fellow fans, I get the chance to harp on what's going on with Leinster, Ireland and the wider rugby world. First up, joining me is someone earning cap number 58. Welcome back to Mr. Conor Cronin.
58 for the end of the season. That's not bad at all.
That's a good haul indeed. And our second guest is making appearance number 37, coming to us once more from the great Rock of Gibraltar. Hello again to Mr. Rich Massoud.
Hi, Jeff. Hi, Conor.
Good to see you both. We're doing this just as the Euro final is kicking off, and this match is something we'd much rather be talking about at the moment. That's for sure. So let's crack on with it. Our feature match of the week, of course, was South Africa v Ireland in the second and final test of the Castle Lager incoming series. Conditions at Kings Park in Durban looked much like last week, with the exception that they were actually happening at sea level this time. And after all the pre-match palaver, it was Jack Crowley getting things underway once more. Conor.
Yeah, getting things underway. And, you know, a little bit of kick tennis. I want to just really quickly point out that one of the first players to actually touch the ball for us is Jamie Osbourne. When I was taking notes for this match, I was actually using a notebook that I hadn't used in a while. And the previous match is all a huge amount talking about what was a Leinster game, the Leinster-Gloucester game from way, way back. And just talking so much at the time about Jamie Osbourne, and I think it's totally worth saying. I think he had a great match again yesterday. I think he's really proven himself. You know, for a fella who's 22, for a position we might have been worried about, I was delighted to see him be one of the first people to take a ball. I think our intent from the beginning was pretty clear. I think the plan was we're going to offloads, we're going to opt for as fast a ruck as we can. And the Boks were planning to challenge that with some very, very, very fast line speed. Now, look, as somebody pointed out in the chat, you know, all line speed is perfectly acceptable until it's not, and until you find yourself offside. But I think our own pace, our own speed, both in attack and defence, was really, really good. And like you see it very early on in those early exchanges where Gary Ringrose, who found himself on the wing a lot, I thought, throughout the whole game. He just seemed to be out there more often than I might have expected. But he chips and chases and puts in this, puts real pressure on Pollard with his chase. Like, he's so fast following up the ball, and it seemed from the off that it was much, much more intense. And, you know, as Pollard kicks that ball out, and for a moment I was surprised. I'm like, oh, Pollard is right there at the fullback position. Where's LaRue? And it's only in the watch back. That bang LaRue took to be the first of the Springboks to go off was pretty hard. Like, it's an unfortunate one. He finds his head on the wrong side of James Lowe's leg, and there's nothing in it. You know, it's a rugby incident, and there's no. It's just his own bad placement. And when I'd watched the match at the time, I'm like, Jesus, he's like, when he stood up to get out of the way and he slips, or at least that's what I thought it was. And it's only in the watch back you see how bad he clearly banged his head. So I was delighted that the medics had done their job well and got him off the pitch and looked after him. But it was a big loss for South Africa from very early on, and it was almost two big losses at once, because Mozart was a face full of blood and somehow managed to stay on the pitch, with Snyman coming on and immediately going. Sorry, Snyman. I got corrected with that. But I said that yesterday. Snyman coming on and immediately going back off again, because apparently the blood wasn't that bad. But look, we've the line out that followed there led to the first scrum of the day. I know there's been lots of talk from lots of people that we should have a scrum expert come on to referee the scrum. Carl Dixon is not that expert. He is definitely not an expert on what happens in the scrum. I think he's looking for a particular picture. And even if that picture is not a legal picture, he's looking for what he's looking for. And he has in his own head what he wants to see in advance. And if one team demonstrates that, you'd think if either team demonstrates that, well, I'll get to that after, but if a team demonstrates what he's looking for, he's going to penalise it. I think for this one, look, what you end up with is a free kick. So I'm kind of like, okay, well, it's a bit surprising that we've ended up with a free kick from the first scrum. But look, it becomes about off that it's fast pace and being where you want to be. For us, the fast ball was working, and that fast line speed, they were trying worked against them as they got caught offside, and we managed to get the first 3 of the day. And then again, off the restart, it's just fast pace. It almost seemed hectic how fast the ball was moving so much of the time, how much was going on, how much players are scrambling to be in the position they need to be in. And I think, well, it feels hectic to me watching it. I'm sure for the players, they know exactly what they're doing. They know where they want to be. They know why they want to be there. So, it's, no complaints. And all, not long after that restart, we get Etzebeth going off officially with blood this time, and Snyman coming back on. He must have felt like a yo-yo. He was in, he was out, he was in. It was quite a set of changes for him. We get, as much as I think Osbourne had a great game, his one particularly bad moment in the game was around then, where he takes a man out in the air. Again, he's watching the ball the whole time. It's a rugby incident. I think it was a piece of good refereeing, like where they've said he's looking at the ball the whole time. He just happens to have run into somebody. But they get the penalty, they get the line out, and they get their first opportunity in our 22. And I think our defence, particularly in that first half, was excellent. Some really, really brilliant moments of defence, and I'm going to highlight a couple of them as we go. But I think just in general, it's worth saying how good our defence was. And I also think it's really important how well we turned our defence into attack when we had opportunities, because off that defence, we get an exit. Off that line out, they miss the jumper, and it lands in Ronan Kelleher's hand. And Kelleher, he really took his opportunity yesterday. I really think that. I think he looked and said, Dan's not here. I have to step up. I have to demonstrate why I could be number one for much, much longer after Dan comes back. And maybe he shouldn't have overtaken me in the first place, or whatever was going through his head. It was working. He had a great game because he took that ball, and even the kick he put through, which completely turned what were South African attackers, but they're all out of place, and he turns all of them. And again, the pressure that's being exerted means that the ball is eventually with the ball kick clear, and we get Osbourne taking it really, really well again. He's got a lovely pass out to after face, there's a pass out to Furlong, who has that great inside pass to Big Joe, who's running a great line, powering through, getting us closer and closer and closer to their line. And I think when Crowley goes for the crossfield kick, I had questions in my head because, is it the right thing to do in that situation? Were we going to get the right player up on it? I think my big issue is that it's a contest in the air, but somebody hits that ball. Somebody's hands come off that ball for the ball to go into their in-goal area. Now, if Robbie hits it and the ball has gone forward off him, then it's a South African scrum. If the South African player has hit that ball back and then they've grounded it in their in-goal area, because that's what happens, then it's a scrum. But somehow we've got a goal line dropout. Somebody's knocked that ball in the air. Somebody's hand has touched that ball and it has gone into the in-goal area. So I think he's made the wrong call. I am not complaining for even a second about the call he made in that particular circumstance. It does happen a couple more times during the game, though, where it's like, oh, that's a contest. Okay, who won the contest? Just because a player hasn't come away with the ball doesn't mean that that player is or isn't in the right. or in the wrong as it may be. Like I say, I think the goal line dropout isn't the correct call, but I'm very happy with it because of everything that happens after that. Because off the dropout, it comes to Doris, who I feel like he must have carried 112 times over the course of the game. He was constantly taking the ball into contact, and he does it really, really well because he protects it. He positions himself really well at the back as the ruck is forming. He manages to wriggle himself to place the ball well for who's there. And then it's just a couple of quick phases to get it out to Osbourne, who does a beautiful juggling act before he takes it again, passes it out to Henshaw, who passes it back inside to Conor Murray, who's diving across the line for the first try of the game. And all of a sudden, it's 10-0 to us. And it was looking really, really promising at that point. Like, it was such a positive start. Say, all the pace that we had, all the willingness to carry, the willingness to offload. And the offloads weren't always the right call, but the willingness to keep the ball in play. And we talk so much about how Gibson Park does that for us, how he keeps that fast ball, how he keeps it in play, how it's always moving. And in fairness to Conor Murray, like, I mean, I'm not saying he was lightning quick, but he's quicker than I've seen him in a while. He just was doing his absolute best to continue that kind of play that we've been building with fast ruck ball. After the restart, I only want to mention this because I think it could be compared to something in Rich's half. There's a really strange moment where Ringrose, as he pushes up, gets taken out by Peter Steph to Toit, and like quite a firm shove to the ground. Where it's one of those where if it had been called foul play, it definitely would have been foul play. To follow on some of the things we were chatting about earlier. I'm only mentioning it because it's worth comparing later on. And then the Boks are unfortunate that they lose another player because Motsert goes off officially this time. I think he's done something to his leg on top of all the blood, on top of all the wrapping around his head from bumping it. He's ended up going off, and Etzebeth comes back in, and Snyman comes back in as well, and just there's a whole lot of back and forths in that second row, and I think it impacted a bit on how they would play, whatever plan they had for whatever players at whatever time. It goes out the window when you've got to replace for injury. I think it might have had a little bit of an impact. It shouldn't. Your professional players step up, do your job, but I think it did have some impact on them. Okay. Not long after that, we've got a scrum where, even though it looks like Andrew Porter is staying very, very square, like he's straight on, but he's called for boring in, and I'm not sure how that's happened. And I think it's because it's being moved from the other side because their loose head isn't staying square. He's the one actually boring in, and the impact that's having on the whole scrum is that it is turning. So it then ends up looking like, because Dixon is standing on that side, that it's Andrew Porter who's the one at fault. And off that penalty, they take it. They opt for the 3 and are successful. So we're up to 10-3. And then off the next, when the next scrum happens, there's a really interesting moment because Dixon says to the loose head, stay square and straight. And in my head, then I'm going like, was he not square and straight the last time? Because if he wasn't, then why are you penalising the wrong guy? And again, it is lack of knowledge, I think, at scrum time that's impacting there, and he's relying on other people to tell him what's going on. But I think he needs somebody who sits down with him and says, "Let's look at this video. Here's why you've made the wrong call. You were right to say to him, stay straight and square, but then on the next scrum, we're being penalised for what he's just given them a penalty for 5 minutes earlier." And it just seems so inconsistent. It just seems so much like, sorry about that. It just seems so much like his inconsistency is making an impact on how the game can be. We get another scrum not long after that as a result of as a result of the line out that came off that penalty. But as that scrum gets cleaned up, Crowley goes to kick it clear. And I think because of the way he'd been kicking previously, I think Quagga Smith reads it really well. It's like it's coming to him and he's going to go for the Gary Owen. If I get there quick enough, I'm charging it down. And he charges it well. And he is sprinting down the pitch. And I honestly thought, try time here. And watching it back and watching it from a couple of angles and the distance Jamie Osbourne travels to get there and make that tackle, the support coming in from Ringrose and Doris to try and turn the ball over, and then the turnover, which is successful and it's brilliant. And actually the penalty they get is for somebody tackling off their feet. And suddenly we're clearing our territory. And it's just really, really solid defense. It's just clever. We've gone from attack. We now have to switch to defense. And how well can we do this? And I thought it was an absolutely brilliant little bit of play. That the distance he covered, the speed at which he did it. You'd swear he'd been playing fullback his whole life, and certainly his whole professional career. It was really, really, really strong. It's not long before they're back in our 22, but the maul that they set up when they get back into our 22 not long after, and I think they end up back there because we've cleared it without being with the ball having been carried back in the 22. I think it was that one, but they set up a maul anyway, or maybe it was actually no, it's a penalty for not releasing. That's what it was. And the maul they set up, and you're like, oh boy, here we go. This could be it. This could be the try. And I don't know how Joe McCarthy gets from where he was to where he ended up. I'd love to, like, I'm going to watch it back again later. I'm going to slow it down to see, does he actually just teleport through the man or something? Because somehow he goes from being behind the maul to being the Springbok side of the maul with the ball in his hand. And I don't know how he gets through. I don't know, like, he'd no right to get through. But I am loving his maul defense. He is so strong in that situation and he's pushing through. And it's absolutely brilliant. And unfortunately, we end up knocking it on and they opt for a scrum where, again, the loose head, who had been told to be square and straight, is not, but somehow gets rewarded for that. But they take the penalty and it's 10-6. And look, we're getting towards the end of the half. You're kind of like, okay, if we go in 10-6, that's pretty satisfactory. We go for the up and under, and Robbie tries to take it and he gets obstructed. And then it's a thing of, great, well, let's take the 3 points in this very, very kickle position. I'm thinking, oh, even better. We're going to be 13-6 up at halftime. But it's not going to finish quite that way because off the next restart, they kicked the restart too long. That's what it was. They kicked the restart too long, and it's dotted down in the in goal. So we go back for the scrum at halfway. I don't think Faf's ever behind the ball in his attempts to wrap up Caelan Doris there. But look, we get it. It comes left to Lowe, who kicks it and chases it. And I don't know what had Pollard rattled in open field play like that, but how he slips, why he slips, I don't know. But he falls over in his own in-goal area. And now we've got a 5-meter scrum. And I was just looking, going, how can we make this work? And I genuinely thought, as Doris broke away from the back of the scrum, I thought he had enough to get across. They did really, really well to hold him out. And as we went to the phases, it just became a case that eventually they were going to infringe. I'm glad they did when they did, because as the ball came to Robbie and he knocked it on, I thought, oh, crap. And then I saw the arm up for the advantage because they'd been offside. And again, listening back to it, you can actually hear Irish players shouting, is he not offside? Is he not offside? And sure enough, he was offside. So clock in the red, 5 meters out. The absolutely correct call was take the 3 points from right in front of the posts where the penalty was. And we're going into halftime 16 points to 6.
Yeah, I mean, what makes this such an intriguing test match, I mean, even if you weren't up for one of the sides, was just how many different sort of subplots or themes there were to come from it. You don't often get that, you know? I mean, sometimes it's just like, oh, one team was dominating the scrum, or one scrum half was having a worldie, or there's usually one thing that you can pull out from it. But there's just, I mean, I've kind of lost count of even in just the first half of all the different things. That, I mean, the only things I'll say is, like you said at the start, you had a note about Jamie Osbourne. In my notes, I have the words I have it abbreviated JO catches, and I wrote that, and I have that about 6, 7, 8 times throughout the game, because they were testing us so much with the high ball. It was amazing. And then, like, of course, you said that there's one another time JO tackles. That tackle on Smith was just outstanding. He came out of nowhere. And I think the interesting interesting thing you said at one stage where South Africa had the ball and you said this could be the try, and this is basically how we were several times throughout the match. You were kind of almost expecting that first try, and that Quagga Smith carry, that was the block and the carry and the nearly try. That started a spell of about 7 minutes. Like you said, you had Joe McCarthy making a nuisance of himself in the line out and all that stuff. That was a 7-minute spell, and at the end, they got a penalty, but that was a victory for us, big time. That they only got those 3 points, and that was huge. We're talking about, obviously the themes from this match. A lot of people talk about drop goals at the end, and yes, we will get to that. But there were so many different stages, and that 7-minute spell where they were on our line, they had scrums, they had 5-meter scrums, they had situations where you think, well, this is. I mean, how are we going to keep this out, even the way we're defending? But we managed it, and we got, and then we were able to go back to the other end and restore that 10-point lead. That we got an early 10-point lead. They pegged us back, but we were able to push it back before halftime, and that was good. What did you think, Rich?
Yeah, the one thing for me was I had a bit of trepidation going into this match, last match of the season, of an incredibly long season. What's the attitude from the players going to be like? Despite the fact that they're very proud and very professional, we're all human beings and they're tired. It's a very long season. But it was the attitude that they took straight into that match. To be perfectly honest, I think it absolutely rocked the Saffers. It really rocked them. Yes, they were also rocked by, and I think this was he was only on for about 2 or 3 minutes, but Willie Leroux, I think that really, really hurt them. It hurt them an awful lot throughout the course of the match, because there would have been occasions in that match where he would have exerted a certain level of control with better kicking, which is not to say that Feinberg didn't do a very good job, but he's more of an attacking threat than Willie Leroux ever is. But Willie Leroux is able to control the pace of the match and the tempo of the match, which Feinberg really doesn't know how to do just yet. He's a very good player, and I'll speak about him in the second half. But my biggest takeaway from it was, we've come here to play. We've come here to beat you. This isn't just about not getting mullered. This is about, I'm on your patch, and I'm here to beat you, and sending that very clear and loud message from the off, and that rocked them. That rocked them for the whole half. And it's like Connor says, we may have lost we may have built up a 10-point lead that we lost. We were pegged back, but then we restored that, and it was always the coming back to it. And the other thing, of course, which will feature a lot in my input in the second half, was the defense. At the end of the match, my wife turns around to me and she says, "Do you realize they haven't scored a try? We've held them tryless." And of course, you're captured in the emotions of the moment. You don't tend to realize these things until afterwards. And I thought, bloody hell, we have. And it was, and you have to make your own luck. But an awful lot of that was not luck. It was the sheer power of the defense. And, just like Connor's just mentioned, how Joe McCarthy nicked that ball from that maul is beyond me. It really is beyond me. I actually remember watching it, and he actually steals it off whoever was it Bongi and Bonambi who had the ball at the back? But he comes through the middle and nicks it off him. But you don't see it in real time. It's only when they show the replays. And you think, bloody hell, the president. And it's not the first time, and it won't be the last time he's done that. He's done it for Leinster as well in some matches. He's just awesome. In terms of maul defense, he is awesome. So yeah, my biggest thing from that first half was that it was the attitude that the boys brought to the match. We pushed them back. There was an awful lot of talk before the match that Ireland had been found out and as to the manner of how they play, and therefore it's easy now because all you have to do is counteract that, and that it was a bit one-dimensional, all that crap that people bring up in certain publications. It was disproved in that very first half. There were some stages there where the Boks didn't know whether they were coming or going, and that was down to the variety of the play, the intensity that they brought, the ability to move the ball fast from the breakdown, which was one of the things that last week they were targeting. Clearly, they did their homework during the course of the week, and they put it into play in yesterday's match.
Yeah, I mean, talking about our defense, I mean, we kept them triless here, and if you think about it, you go back to last week, they scored after 2 minutes. They did a move right up the middle and scored, but they did get 2 more tries, but we practically gave them those tries, basically ourselves. I mean, contentious calls notwithstanding, but still, when it comes to actually creating it, they hadn't done anything since the second minute of the first test. So it was a really concerted effort over the 2 games from Ireland, and just keeping them at bay. But anyway, listen, when it got to the halftime whistle, we were more than happy with the 10-point lead, and the score, like you say, was South Africa 6, Ireland 16. Now, before we return to the pod, first a little reminder of all the different places you'll find us in the Ruggersphere. First of all, we have a radio slot every Friday after the 5 o'clock news on Dublin South 93.9 FM. Then when it comes to online, as well as our main site at harpinonrugby.com, we also have a presence on X, formerly known as Twitter. We have our match previews plus bonus recordings from our pods on our YouTube channel. We're also on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Mastodon. So if you're on any or all of those platforms, please do give us a follow to check out our full range of Leinster and Ireland rugby content. So in the first test, we thought ourselves lucky to be 5 points down at the break, but this time we had a 10-point cushion. So it seemed like it was all about who was to score first, Rich.
Yeah, I don't think you would have lost your bet if you'd bet on South Africa bringing greater intensity into that second half. Clearly, there were going to be words said in their dressing room that clearly were, and their intensity was upped considerably in that second half. We kicked loosely, and this is, for the first opening stanza of that second half, first 5 minutes or so, one of our very few loose kicks, but we kicked to Feinberg and Ngomazulu, and he pretty much waltzed through our midfield, hitting Tig pretty high up on the way through, and you can see he's clearly dazed. He offloads to Colby, but I'll repeat this: our scramble defense was very, very good. And once we settled into our defensive shape, on this particular occasion, although it wasn't always the case, but on this particular occasion, where I think they missed Willie Leroux throughout the course of that match, they could most certainly have had someone other than Faf de Klerk playing, because he was absolute rubbish on the day, and that certainly didn't help them. So on this occasion, he actually sends a pointless grubber through. It was going nowhere, picked up by a certain Jamie Osbourne. We eventually clear our lines. We kick to touch, a line out to them. And what happened on more than one occasion throughout the course of the match was we stole their line out. We really put the hoodoo on their line out on a number of occasions. But then sadly, they increase their pressure, and Robbie infringes with hands on the ground. I think this was the clearer of the two, because there was another one where I think Andrew Porter was harshly done by. But anyway, that's this one was pretty clear, very kickable. Pollard slots it, so all of a sudden it's a 7-point game. Their pressure continues, and this is where I think we got lucky. And when I say lucky, and the context of that is that it could quite easily have been a red card for Caelan Doris with a croc roll on Malcolm Marks, who was recently into the match. Thankfully, it was only a yellow card. I think it's. I want to make the point that I totally agree with this new law, because some of the things that prevents, watching the other match, the Wales match earlier, they were talking to Sam Warburton and they were asking his opinion. They said, well, that's one of these croc rolls is the reason why I have a synthetic ligament in my knee. There you have it. So anyway, we were very lucky there that it was only a yellow card. So again, increased pressure from the box. I thought Grant Williams, who came on for Faf shortly after this, brought a greater deal of intensity, a greater attacking threat. I don't know what was wrong with Faf, but certainly he wasn't in the game. So after that Croc roll, of course, we gave away a pen. It was very kickable. Pollard slots it again. So now it's a 4-point match, and shortly thereafter, more pressure from the box. We ship another penalty offside. Very kickable. As I said, and a lot of this was created by Grant Williams' increased tempo. I think we were able to deal with the slower tempo that Faf de Klerk and in conjunction with Pollard were bringing. Neither of them, well, Faf on a good day, yes, but certainly Henry Pollard is not known for his speed. And I think Grant Williams was causing us issues. And this offside was a result of his good play. And, all of a sudden we get, it becomes a 1-point game. They slot the penalty again. And then there's a bit of toing and froing for the next 4 or 5 minutes of that third quarter. And I mentioned the third quarter because much in the same way as the match was a game of two halves, this half was a half of 2 quarters. And I'll come to that in a second. One of the things that really pissed me off, and we were 54 minutes into the match by then, one of the many kicks that Jamie Osbourne takes, he gets absolutely floored by Oxen Chair. I thought it was a bit high where he got hit. Wasn't even looked at by the ref team or the TMO. But the one thing that seriously pissed me off was, and it's pretty evident, I saw it all the way from Gibraltar, and it was as they go down, Oxen Chair sticks his mitt out and drags the ball back whilst he's prone on the ground. That's a clear pen. And this was extremely kickable. It was right slap bang in the middle of the pitch between the 10 and their 22. Wasn't even looked at. Craig Evans, I think it was the AR was on that side, didn't even see it. But anyway, there's more pressure after that. And of course, what these things do is that they don't alter the momentum as perhaps they might have done had we clawed back 3 points then and retaken and extended the lead again. So what happens is that just a minute later, there's a nice line break from Sneeman, passes it to Marks, more scramble defense, but again, we give another pen right in front of the posts. And given the amount of pressure that they had, I think this was a win for us because I was also anticipating when are they going to score a try? And on more than one occasion, I was saying, okay, here we go. They're over. But they weren't. So anyway, they go 18-16 up. So for the first time, they take the lead. And this is where the match starts to change. So we're in the 55th minute, and all of a sudden it becomes a bit of a toing and froing of mistakes, whether that was the pressure being exerted, whether that was fatigue kicking in. But the fact is that then Quacker Smith gives away a very silly penalty. He just jumps over, plonks himself to try and get the ball back right in front of the ref. Dixon has no option but to give the pen, and we knock it over. But again, 1 minute later, shortly after the kickoff or the restart from South Africa, we ship a cheap pen. The cheap pen was that we knock it on, and Joe McCarthy picks it up from in front of the knock on. So under normal circumstances, a pen, except that when you look at it on the replay, it's actually Feinberg who touches the ball backwards. So Joe McCarthy was perfectly entitled to go for that ball. Penalty given. Tempest, the TMO, is trying to get a hold of Dixon. Oh, I can't hear you. Carry on. Take the pen. Oh, well, it's too late now. We've taken the pen. That was not a penalty. But because he'd already given it, and because allegedly because of the noise on the ground or in the ground, he couldn't hear what Tempest was saying. I mean, that's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous decision. Not the only decision.
Just to throw in, he's supposed to be allowed until the restart. Correct. A decision for a score can be called back.
Correct.
So could he not hear him for 2.5 minutes?
It's bollocks. No, it was bollocks. It was clearly bollocks. He made his mind up.
Feinberg did a good job of acting though, because he obviously knew he'd hit the ball because it hit his hands, but he was going like this. He was calling. He was the first one actually calling for the knock on. So it's like he sold that well, but of course the replay suggested otherwise. And there was crickets from the South African commentators I noticed as well. The replay was shown right in front of them. But anyway,
we were very hard done by there, and so of course what this does is it takes South Africa to a 2-point lead. Then at this time, actually, Frawley and Caelan Blade have come on for Conor Murray and Crowley. But again, a few minutes later, we ship a pen from a scrum. Again, issues with this one because he should have actually, Connor was talking about this earlier. He should have actually pinged the South African loose head, but he ends up resetting. And then when it's pretty much the same as happened in the first scrum, and Finlay Bealham goes down, he automatically pings Finlay Bealham. So we ship a pen there when perhaps a reset would have been the fairer option. But hey, I'm hardly an expert on scrums. I don't think Carl Dixon is either, or any of that ref team, to be honest. But anyway, so penalty. So of course, now we're looking at having to score a try to win this. And the momentum has been all with South Africa, the whole of this match. So how are we going to regather the momentum? Like I said at the beginning, I had a bit of a sense of trepidation. They could have folded, given that they'd lost a 10-point lead and were now facing a deficit in South Africa, in Durban, where South Africa had not lost in 8 years. Enter Master Kieran Frawley. And I think the catalyst, and before anybody says anything, yes, I have a man crush. I've had it for ages on Kieran Frawley. I think he's Johnny Sexton's natural successor. But I'm sure we'll talk about that at another time. He actually, the Saffers get a penalty. They go for touch. He manages to do what James Lowe was unable to do. He manages to do what James Lowe was able to do, but there was no Cheslin Colby chasing him down. So he gets the ball, passes it to Jamie Osbourne. Jamie Osbourne pings it, and they get the line out between the 10 and the 22. It's a poor line out from us, but we get a pen for holding on. So we go to the corner, get a free kick, we tap and go, we're held up, and then there is the pragmatism that we haven't necessarily learned to associate with, certainly not with Leinster, but not with Ireland either. But the drop goal is back, clearly. So the next best thing, because we get held up, it's a goal line dropout, collected, passed to Kieran Frawley, who has all the time in the world, and that's the sign of a good player. When a good player has time on the ball, you know clearly he knows what he's doing, and he goes over with a wonderful drop goal from way past the 10-meter line. And like I said, the narrative had changed then already in this match. Now we were on the front foot. Now we were going forward. Now we were trying to create things. In no small measure to Frawley. He actually tries a crossfield kick, which doesn't come off, which could have knocked his confidence. It didn't. Then for the next 5-8 minutes, it's extremely tight between both sides. Extremely tight in terms of territory. It's pretty much between the two 10-meter lines. But then they knock on after they attack, and we're within our 22. There is a scrum. We take the ball from the scrum. Frawley runs forward with the ball and then kicks, fully intended, a beautiful grubber kick along the ground. He weights it perfectly so that Feinberg has to feel the ball, and the pressure was there from the chase. And in effect, what happens is that we get a field position well within their half, and of course the rest is history. We win the line out. A couple of phases later, we move inbounds towards the midfield, and eventually blade back to Kieran Frawley, who has the biggest cojones in the world, clearly, not least in the context of the drop goal miss in the Heineken Champions Cup final, and he puts it over, and fuck him, basically, because not least because, and I've watched this on many occasions today. The shenanigans by Snyman, to a degree, when he tries to bump Joe McCarthy. Joe McCarthy either didn't see him or saw him and moved his body, and Snyman would have looked idiotic. I mean, he isn't the smallest person. He would have looked idiotic trying to clunk into a departing Joe McCarthy. But the worst one was Colby. Colby tries to bounce off Caelan Doris, and then He does a Neymar and rolls all the way to land at the feet of Finlay Bealham, who looks at him with absolute disgust, as he should, whilst Kieran Frawley is slotting the drop goal. So yeah, that was full time. Dixon was asked the question by 76,000 bloody South Africans on the pitch. He asked the TMO. TMO saw nothing wrong with any of that, and Bob is your uncle. Full-time whistle, and we beat them.
Yeah, I mean, it's another half just full of talking points, and like you say, culminate at the end. Just the things to add to to that sequence at the end. I mean, Frawley just basically stole the show himself. But there was at the start of that move, there was that catch from James Lowe and Mark, and then just the quick tap and running out of his 22. Yep. That's another example. I say this every time he plays. He doesn't just there's what you're expected to do, and there's what James Lowe does. He always tries to go one level up. What the basic thing you're expected, even in test level rugby, the most basic thing, your fundamental thing to do. Normally, you just catch it, mark it fine, take a beat. Boot it as far as you can, but he's not going to do that. He takes a quick tap. He's got 10 Springboks in front of him. He knows they can't touch him, so he's past them, and he's basically set up that momentum that had us down that end of the pitch. But also there were 2 scrums in that final 10 minutes that were absolutely key. Now you don't remember them because nothing happened, but that's the point. You know what I mean? It's like it was they locked out. We were in trouble at scrum time all through the match. We were getting pinged left, right, and center for all sorts of reasons that didn't seem to make sense. But for those 2, they were golden, and then which allowed to give Frawley the platform to do what he did. What did you make of it, Connor?
Yeah, look, it was a very, very, again, hectic, frantic pace, just constant movement, constant pressure on both sides, and again, just the defense was enormous. Absolutely incredible defense. That anytime they came towards us, the efforts made to make sure that, okay, maybe we give away 3 here, but that's all they're getting. And more often than not, we weren't even giving that away. We did really well to any team that has to rely on 8 penalties to try and win without really demonstrating any opportunities to score over the entire game. And all the pressure they had, particularly in that second half, because they had much, much more pressure in the second half. I think we got towards 36, 37 minutes, and a stat popped up on the screen to suggest that we'd had 66% of the possession after 35, 36 minutes. So, they weren't getting the opportunities in the first half. They definitely had them in the second half. They had lots of opportunity in the second half to be creative, to do something and see what they could create, and just no opportunity. And I think I was so pleased that, forget the fact that he landed the drop goals. I was so pleased to see Kieran Frawley come on and play that well, to play to a standard that is international test level 10. Anyone looking at his progress, anyone looking at the kind of player he is and suggesting that maybe he's not good enough to play 10 for whoever is clearly making a mistake. And I think it's one of the things that Andy Farrell has done so well over the last couple of years, is that he's seeing something in players that, because he's not as blinkered, I think, provincial coaches, they have the week in, week out, we have been playing you here, we will continue to play you here, we will continue to play you this way. And I say, it can become blinkered. And I don't think it's intentional. I don't think anyone's planning to stunt anybody or anything else by these actions. I think just what's happening is that they're just blinded by necessity within the group and what they can do. Whereas Farrell is looking at players and saying, I'm going to bring you in and we're going to do something a little different. And you look at just the 2 good examples, one being Jemison Gibson Park, who was not first choice scrum half for Leinster when he started playing for Ireland, and the difference he has made. Let's look at Kieran Frawley and how he played at the weekend. Let's throw in Jamie Osbourne on top of that. Let's throw in how well Calvin Nash is playing now that he's, and we're seeing how well he's playing in a context that's very different to provincial rugby, because he's in this test atmosphere. Look at the progress Finlay Bealham has made over the last couple of years. 2 years ago, you might have said, let's hope Ty can last 60 minutes and see how Finlay goes for that last 20. Whereas let's look back to the Six Nations and say, look how well Finlay Bealham played for 60 minutes. And when he was then replaced by somebody else, and the progression of players. And I think this game really sums up how players are progressing under Andy Farrell and under what he's creating as I suppose I want to call it his legacy. Every coach leaves their legacy and leaves their mark on a team, and he's creating an environment where these players clearly believed they could win. That whatever any of the rest of us thought, or however much we were worried, the defensive structures he has in place for the team work. The attacking systems that he's developing along with his coaches work. Everything's working. He's building something incredibly strong within the group. There's trust there. There's knowledge. Players like Jamie Osbourne makes that tackle in the first half, and he's got Quagga Smith to contend with, who may very well have decided, well, I'm going to put the ball down, I'm going to stand up, and I'm going to run over you. But there are two players getting there to support him. And I think the players really believe in what they're doing. You see the result when we win. And like before the drop goal, the ball goes out to touch, and you see Kieran Frawley. You can see what he says. You don't have to be an expert lip reader to see the words drop goal in what he says. Like, we have a plan now, lads. We are going to win this. We can make this happen. Give me 2 phases. Get me that ball.
Yeah, it was early in the set as well, wasn't it? It was they could have taken it a few more, but no, they were ready to go. Yeah,
the confidence, and I think wherever that confidence has come from, and whether it's the confidence that says, geez, I missed one earlier in the season, I'm not doing that again, or maybe it's a coach who has a little word in the ear saying, geez, that was bloody close. Let's see a bit more of that. Let's see what else you can do. There's faith in those players coming from the top down. And it's really shown in like I said, in everything they did, particularly in that second half, when they had the ball that little to still come out with the win. There's a lot of quality there. And I think fair play to Andy Farrell for looking past whatever else is going on anywhere else. He picks the team he believes will do the job. He puts players in positions. And I know like lots of people might have looked and said, geez, he put Peter O'Mahony on the bench, and O'Mahony came on and he played well. He did everything that was required of him. You cannot for a second criticize his commitment or his willingness.
Rich said in his bit that the game changed at the 55th minute, and that's actually the moment O'Mahony came on. And that's nothing against Josh. It's a different kind. It's a different. He comes on, and it's the leadership he brings on, and just his presence on the pitch was just what we needed. We always knew that was his role on the day, and he did it well.
There's nothing wrong with the players who started. The fact that, again, I can't imagine at any stage Peter O'Mahony sitting in a room somewhere going, I'm not getting started, and this is shit, and I'm not getting, and we'll see that talk online, like how dare that decision. But he buys into it. He buys into the plan, and he knew what he had to do coming on to make sure that plan worked. I also think massive shout out to Caelan Blade, who might not have ever thought his opportunity would come with who's ahead of him. And I think he's probably looked and said, geez, I've kind of looked out here with 2 injuries, but here's my shot. And, that pass is anything other than accurate. We're not scoring either of those drop goals. They're pinpoint, because he knows what's expected of him. And I think the trust that's being put in the players for the systems, and I know we're not going to have Andy Farrell all year, but all those players know how to do the job.
Absolutely.
So, it's going to be, there's a lot of positives still to come from this group of players.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting the way you sort of listed, as well as Osbourne and Frawley. You went back as far as Gibson Park as well. So it's almost like Farrell is a sort of a scout for the provinces, finding players for their own team. Because we've got our Ireland hats on now, but obviously at some stage we're talking about Leinster. We're going to be thinking, well, Frawley and Osbourne, how can you not pick them for Leinster? Going forward. But then you look at we've got Keenan coming back, we've got Jordy Barrett coming in, and there's all these big decisions to be made with these players. So there's a lot of discussions to go ahead. But listen, on the day, it was a great finish. We were always in it. The South Africans came back strong in the second half, but like I say, they were a man down for a while, and they were sort of killing us death by 1,000 threes. It looked like, but we always stayed within them, and we Ireland don't do drop goals generally. Here we got two to win a great test. So, like you say, the final score was South Africa 24, Ireland 25. Now, elsewhere in Test rugby, we had New Zealand and Australia closing out 2-0 series wins over England and Wales, respectively, while in Buenos Aires, Felipe Cantapone got his first win as Puma's boss when they put away the much-troubled French touring side 33-25. Also, Georgia got themselves a notable win in Japan, which you would think might increase their chances of moving up a tier even further, but I, for one, won't be holding my breath. Anyway, also in South Africa, we had the semi-final of the World Under-20s. Ireland got off to a flying start against England, but once the reigning Six Nations champions were able to show their incredible dominance in the scrum, we struggled to keep up with them. And if anything, we did well to be behind by just 11 at the end. There's still one more match for us. That'll be the third place playoff, kicking off at 3:30 p.m. on Friday against New Zealand, while the final will be England against France. All of which brings us to our final thoughts from the match in Durban, starting with Connor.
I think it's a lot within the wrap, like incredible defense, determined attack, determined and willingness to try things, willingness to, whether it's an offload or a kick pass or an up and under at a time where I might be looking going, geez, just stick with a couple more phases and see how we go, or, and this is why I'm not making all the decisions, because I might make different ones. I think it's been a really, really challenging couple of tests. The one thing all of us wanted, we didn't get. We all wanted it to be an injury-free series. And again, you question a little bit, why are we going to the reigning world champions for a 2-test tour, which if you lose one, you can't win the series. Why are we going somewhere where, like in my head the whole time I was thinking, surely we go somewhere where we can bring developing players and expose them to Farrell's systems before we lose him for a year, so that when he comes back, he has a little sense of, well, these players are coming up and I've seen them in training and I've seen them on a pitch. But look, we rolled with the decisions we had and came away with a series draw. I think a couple of bounces of the ball, a couple of other decisions in the first test, and indeed in the second test, a couple of decisions that you kind of look at them and you go, oh, that is not I don't believe that's a correct call. And aside from those, we still managed to come away winning a game. We were within 7. As you said earlier, we held them. Yes, they scored a penalty try. Yes, they had the bounce of a ball from one bad decision from a player to get them over for another. But we're the creative team. We're the team building a lead. We're the team consolidating a win at the end of this second test. And I'm really impressed with how they've played over the couple of weeks, but in particular, that bit of dog that came out yesterday, that bit of aggression, that bit of, we're taking no crap from you this week, lads. We gave you too much respect last week. It's not happening this week. And I want to see that every Ireland game from now on. Respect nobody until they earn it on the pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we definitely brought the physicality that was required. I mean, you could see that in the opening stages. I mean, you looked at our injury list after the first week, but after like 10 minutes of the second, it was the South Africans that was going down. That's what the series we wanted. That's the series we wanted. We wanted them matching up in every which way, and it was I think it was the perfect result in a way for the two. That some people were saying, well, isn't it a shame there wasn't a third test? I mean, obviously for us rugby nerds watching, yes, we would love to see it, but when you know the toll it's had on the players and the way they've been playing since about like 1983 at this stage, this season's been going on so long, it's been attritional enough as it is, and it's kind of the perfect finish. On the just a quick thing on the South African side, things weren't great for them. Like we said, we did keep them out. We did keep them out with good defense, but they were kind of sort of lacking in ideas at stages, and they were having kind of systems errors on their own side. We talked already about Faf just not playing well at all, not to his standards. He's been playing over in Japan, I think, this season. I mean, since the World Cup, that's obviously a level down since, to a European season or even a Super Rugby kind of season. But he just didn't seem up to the pace. With one maybe exception in the first half. If that chip over the top had bounced up properly, we might have been talking about a completely different game. If they've been able to score that early, their confidence might have been up. But still, with that attempt, that half attempted kick at the start of the second half, I don't even know what that was. It just was not on, and it's not like him. But like you say, Williams came on, and also I never thought I'd question a South African decision to pick a back row because they've got so many to choose from, but I just don't think Kwagga Smith was the right choice to start for those two matches. He did make mistakes through the times. He dropped a couple in the first test.
But again, if he gathers that ball and clears past Osbourne,
exactly,
would you be saying it?
True, exactly. But I mean, I think over the two matches, I've always seen him as a vital impact player from the bench to come on and give you all. But I just thought that from a situation where South Africa have so many, especially eights to choose from, big eights like Evan Roos and Elric Lowe and those kinds of players who can do the classic South African back rowers. But anyway, listen, there's so much to talk about from this game. We could be going on forever. Rich, what do you think?
I think that what I'll use to explain this is the post-match interview from Siya Kolisi. And the first thing that came out of his mouth was that we outdid them physically on the physicality stakes. Now, this is the captain of the Springboks, who have, from the beginning of recorded history, out-physicaled everything that has been put in their path. Clearly gone are those days. The physicality that the players brought, and it's not just Ireland, but other teams can also do it now, not least the French with those behemoths that they also have. But that was they used to pummel teams. They can't do that any longer, certainly not with Ireland. And the other thing is that this game was won here in the top 2 inches because we could very easily have folded, but they didn't. Not only did they not fold, but they grew into the latter stages of that game and they outfought the Springboks and the clarity of thinking from the players, the decision making was right, and the execution obviously, but without the clear thinking, the execution is academic. And those decisions that were taken in the latter stages of that second half and in the first half, won us that match clearly. So extremely pleased. Yes, it was a series drawn, but morally, that's a series win. Because from where we were with the attritional nature of that first test, the injuries, etc., it felt like a win, easily like a win, and bodes well for the future, not least because it's bringing new players in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if nothing else, Andy Farrell has shown that he's able to take teams on tours to the Southern Hemisphere, lose the first test, and then somehow pick them up at the end of a long season in the North, pick them up and get them and, make the right changes to come back and get a result the following week, which is kind of the remit of a Lions tour when you think of it. So I think they've got the right man for the job. Well, listen, lads, we're going to leave it there. Many thanks again to Conor and Rich for joining me. Good way to end to have a final wrap for the season. Thanks, lads, and hope to have you back on again soon.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
As for our next match of Harpin, it's all about winding down season 5 of the Harpin podcast with probably 2 more planned, one to wrap the under-20s tournament and then one to wrap the entire marathon campaign. No dates as yet for those, so stay tuned to harpinonrugby.com and all our social media channels. The links are in the program notes. In the meantime, stay safe, everyone. Slán.